Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a trajectory that's just wild. We're talking about one of the most polarizing, fascinating, and, let's be honest, undeniably influential figures of our modern era. A guy who literally redefines industries, constantly dancing on that razor's edge between spectacular failure and world-altering success. Yep, we're looking at the architect of chaos himself. But to really grasp the heights of this story, we gotta start right at the absolute bottom. Picture this, it's 2008. He is down to his last $40 million. Now, that sounds like a lot, but his companies were bleeding dry. On a personal level, he's navigating a brutal, highly public divorce. Professionally, he's literally sleeping on factory floors just to keep the lights on. He was losing his cash, and honestly, a lot of people thought he was losing his mind. The stakes here were just unimaginably high. Over at SpaceX, his aerospace venture, they just suffered their third consecutive rocket explosion. A massive, fiery, multi-million-dollar failure. And at the exact same time, his car company Tesla was burning through cash so incredibly fast, it was literally weeks away from total, irreversible collapse.
So the obvious question here is, how on earth did he survive this? I mean, most people in that scenario, they take that last 40 million bucks, retreat to some quiet island, and just call it a day, right? Well, he did the exact opposite. He bet absolutely everything he had on one last rocket launch and one last car model, a monumental gamble that eventually made him the richest man in human history. Okay, let's dive into this.
Section 1. Origins of an Architect. The contrasts in his early life are, frankly, incredibly stark. He was such a quiet, introverted kid that doctors and even his own parents initially thought he might be deaf. His mom, May, was working 5 separate jobs just to keep the family afloat. Meanwhile, his relationship with his wealthy engineer father, Errol, was pretty volatile and exceedingly difficult. And at school, I was even worse. He was relentlessly bullied. It even culminated in this horrific incident where he was thrown down a flight of stairs and beaten until he actually lost consciousness. But here's the turning point. He retreated to the one world he could completely control: code. By age 12, he programmed and sold his first video game, this thing called Blastar, for $500. It was his very first taste of the sheer power of technology. Now, what's really interesting about this timeline is his absolute impatience for the future. Look at this. In 1988, at 17, he leaves South Africa to avoid mandatory military service, chasing that American dream. He lands in Canada with basically nothing, surviving on a strict $1 a day budget, working these grueling manual labor jobs. Eventually, he makes his way down to the University of Pennsylvania, grabbing dual degrees in physics and economics. But look closely at 1995. He heads over to Stanford for a PhD in energy physics, and drops out after exactly 2 days. 2 days! The internet boom was kicking off right then, and he just knew if he didn't jump in immediately, he'd completely miss his window. And that decision snowballed into an escalating series of massive financial risks. Step 1, he founds an online city guide called Zip2 with his brother. Compaq ends up buying it, and he nets $22 million in cash. Now, instead of playing it safe, which, most of us would do, Step 2 shows him instantly pouring almost all of that windfall into a brand new online bank called X.com. Then, Step 3, X.com merges to become PayPal. When eBay swoops in to buy PayPal back in 2002, his stake nets him a staggering $165 million. He is literally rolling his entire fortune from one unproven venture directly into the next. Just stop and think about that number for a second. At just 31 years old, he walks away with $165 million. A centimillionaire. He was officially, completely set for life. But a life of comfort was just never the goal. Instead of retiring to a beach, he chose to gamble every single penny of it to build a legacy for the human species. Section 2. Surviving production hell. Which brings us right into the grueling mid-2000s. This was a period entirely defined by attempting the impossible, trying to revolutionize both space travel and the global automotive industry at the exact same time. Let's look at the SpaceX gamble. Founded in 2002 to make humans multi-planetary using reusable rockets. And guess what? The entire aerospace industry just laughed at him. And for 6 long years, the industry was right. SpaceX suffered 3 devastating explosions. But then, the breakthrough. In 2008, the Falcon 1 became the very first privately developed liquid fuel rocket to reach orbit. That single do-or-die success secured a desperate, life-saving NASA contract to resupply the International Space Station. Fast forward to today, SpaceX operates Starlink, which controls a jaw-dropping 60% of all active satellites currently in orbit. The mocked hobbyist literally became the king of the cosmos.
But while the rockets were finally rising, Tesla was drowning. By 2018, the company had entered what was famously dubbed production hell as they scrambled to scale the Model 3. And the human cost here was intense. He famously slept right there on the factory floor, personally overseeing the assembly line hour by hour, just to prevent the company from dying. He risked his entire reputation on this massive master plan to transition the world to sustainable energy. And against all the odds, the gambit worked. The Model S was named Car of the Year, and the Model X became the safest SUV ever tested. And this brilliantly illustrates how that immense struggle paid off. By 2019, Tesla didn't just participate in the US electric vehicle market, they absolutely dominated it, holding a massive 75% market share. Tesla went from a struggling car startup into this absolute cult of innovation. And that relentless momentum just surged his stock prices, pushing his peak net worth to over $300 billion by 2021, making him, officially, the richest person in the world. So, with practically unlimited capital, the empire expands into true science fiction territory. He founded Neuralink, aiming to connect the human brain directly to computers, actually completing their first human implant in 2024. He also launched the Boring Company, digging these vast underground tunnels with the stated goal of solving soul-crushing city traffic. At this point, he seemed practically untouchable. That is, until a massive, chaotic shift in his public trajectory hit. Section 3. The X Factor. So, the crucial point here is understanding the sheer scale of this transition. In 2022, he purchased Twitter for $44 billion, rapidly rebranding the whole thing to X. And the internal and financial restructuring was severe. The platform suffered an estimated 80% drop in financial valuation following the purchase, and the company culture itself was fundamentally altered by massive, sweeping workforce layoffs. Alongside all that corporate restructuring, his personal, public footprint shifted dramatically too. He leaned heavily into conservative politics, making major headlines by publicly endorsing Donald Trump and even spearheading a brand new initiative called the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. But at the same time, this period was marked by intense, highly public family drama. His daughter, Vivian Wilson, legally changed her name and publicly disowned him. So the fiercely private builder was suddenly living entirely out loud, right in the political crosshairs. Consequently, public perception of his legacy fractured completely. He's now viewed through two vastly different lenses. To one segment of the public, he is championed as a free speech hero, actively protecting digital discourse. To another segment, he's viewed as a narcissistic billionaire, weaponizing his immense platform to sway public opinion and influence elections. Now, we're not here to endorse either viewpoint, but simply to observe the reality that the unified admiration he once enjoyed as a tech visionary has split right down the middle. Section 4. Driven by demons. To really understand why someone who already has everything would invite this level of chaos into his life, we need to slow down and look at the psychological engine driving these decisions. The very foundation of his engineering success is this cognitive framework known as first principles thinking. Basically, instead of relying on analogies or just doing things how they've always been done, he boils incredibly complex problems down to their absolute most fundamental, undeniable truths, and then builds the solution up from scratch. It's this exact mental model that allowed him to look at a bloated aerospace industry and figure out how to build rockets at a fraction of the traditional cost. But you see, logic alone doesn't explain the relentless, exhausting pace of his life. His biographer, Walter Isaacson, summarized his psychological drive with this profound quote: "He is addicted to drama and driven by demons." It's a heavy thought. Beyond the brilliant engineering mind, there is this intense, volatile, and deeply restless human being who seems fundamentally incapable of just experiencing peace. The method behind the madness really starts to click when you look at his core drivers. He actually revealed on Saturday Night Live that he operates with Asperger's syndrome, which he credits for his ability to think so differently, even if it sometimes challenges his social cues. But more importantly, he is driven by profound existential fears, specifically human extinction and what he terms population collapse. You see, he doesn't view his companies simply as businesses. He sees them as vital stepping stones. Tesla and SpaceX, they're just gears in a much larger $10 trillion green energy plan to literally save Earth and extend the light of human consciousness. Which brings us to the ultimate question. As Starship prepares to potentially take humans to Mars, we really have to ask ourselves, are we watching a flawed but vital genius executing a master plan to save humanity? Or are we witnessing a man-child with simply too much power and a reckless ego? History is eventually going to make that judgment for us, but the undeniable truth is, right now, he is the one actively building the future we are all going to live in. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helped you map out the incredible chaos and ambition of this story. Keep questioning everything, and I'll see you next time.